Hello night owls, lovers of mystery and seekers of hidden truths. Before we embark on a journey that delves into secret societies, elite power structures, and a young heir's perilous quest for the truth, I have a small favour to ask. If you're tuning in right now, perhaps from the quiet comfort of your bedroom or a cosy corner of your living space, please take a moment to comment where in the world you're located and what time it is for you. I'm always fascinated by how stories bring people together across time zones, bridging the gaps of distance and culture. And while you're at it, if you find this tale stirring your imagination, especially in those late hours when you want your mind both soothed and intrigued, please subscribe to Sleep Theories. It's the perfect place to discover stories that dance between dream and reality, feeding your curiosity without jolting you awake. Sometimes the best bedtime tales are those with just enough darkness and intrigue to lull you into a thoughtful hush. Tonight's story is titled Bloodline, the Boy Who Exposed the Light. Imagine a childhood wrapped in the trappings of unimaginable wealth, where private jets, vast estates, and hush-hush family gatherings are the norm. Yet behind the gilded veil lies something more profound and more sinister. An ancient order that shapes global events, controlling economies, politics, and even technology from the shadows. This order, colloquially known as the Illuminati, has been whispered about in conspiracy theories for centuries. But for Elias Vance, heir to the storied Vance dynasty, it's not just theory, it's blood-bound truth. From his earliest memories, Elias sensed the strangeness woven into the hush around him. Cryptic symbols, whispered vows at midnight gatherings, a father who insisted that certain knowledge wasn't to be shared. And when he came of age, that hush shattered into a revelation. The Vance family stands at the apex of a global puppet show, pulling strings behind wars and market crashes, forging alliances with others who guard the grand design. Elias's father, Victor Vance, is a leading figure among them, a stoic man convinced that controlling the masses is both their privilege and their duty. But the shining veneer cracks when Elias stumbles upon a trove of digital files, proof that these hush-hush dealings have cost countless lives, suppressed inventions that could have benefited humanity, and orchestrated entire wars. His conscience ignites. No amount of wealth can quell the guilt that churns inside him. He decides to leak the truth, even if it means stepping away from his father's legacy and plunging himself into mortal danger. Because in the Illuminati's world, betrayals are not forgiven. They're silenced, often fatally so. As you read, imagine the glow of chandeliers in ancient manor houses, the quiet rustle of documents locked away in vaults. Envision secret networks that thread through banking halls, media conglomerates, and seats of government, all overseen by a small circle bound by blood oaths. And within that circle stands Elias, poised to cast a light onto centuries of darkness. For some, he's a hero. For others, a threat to be swiftly eliminated. What transpires is a conspiracy thriller, but also a tragic drama about family ties and the cost of unveiling hidden truths. By the end, a private jet will plummet from the sky, and a young man's dream of exposing the Illuminati might lie in ruins. Yet embers of his story might catch fire, thanks to a certain investigative journalist, Ava Monroe, who refuses to let the record vanish into rumour. Settle in. Let the hush of your surroundings amplify the tension on the page. As you slip deeper into this narrative, remember, every rumour about secret societies had to start somewhere, with someone who glimpsed the truth. In Bloodline, the boy who exposed the light, that someone is Elias Vance, a child of wealth, fated to challenge power so old it feels eternal. Now turn down the lights, keep your curiosity alive, and stay with me through the next 5 parts as we step onto a hidden stage where ancient secrets collide with modern ambition. And if your mind begins to drift into that liminal space between waking and sleeping, let the story gently guide you there. Because sometimes The best truths are the ones we find in the quiet hours when the rest of the world is fast asleep. From an early age, Elias Vance learned that his world was not like other children's. While classmates talked about weekend movie outings and beach trips, Elias's weekends might involve stepping onto a private jet for a family retreat in a centuries-old chateau. The hush that enveloped these retreats was as thick as the old tapestries on the walls. Murals depicted robed figures offering cryptic symbols under moonlight. In corners, servants moved silently, their eyes lowered, as if afraid to meet his gaze. His father, Victor Vance, was a towering figure with a voice like cold steel. Victor exuded control. Even in casual conversation, he never truly relaxed. "We are Vances," he'd say during father-son talks in the study. "Our lineage stretches back to those who shaped history's greatest empires. We hold knowledge that few can imagine, but knowledge is worthless without discipline." He emphasized that last word with a cautionary edge, as though discipline was a shield between greatness and downfall. At age 8, Elias caught glimpses of gatherings in the mansion's hidden chambers. Figures in dark suits and formal gowns murmured in low voices, symbols carved onto the wooden floors. Once he saw his father conducting what looked like a candlelit ritual, men and women chanting in unison, swirling incense filling the air, and an ancient crest inscribed on the central stone tile. The crest bore an eye set within a pyramid-like shape, a design that seemed to watch from the gloom. Elias felt a mix of awe and unease. When he asked about it the next day, Victor's jaw tightened. "You saw nothing. Speak of it again, and there will be consequences," he warned. The boy swallowed his curiosity, frightened by his father's seldom-used sternness. School days brought their own peculiarities. Elias attended an elite academy, where peers came from political dynasties, oil magnates or old money families. They formed cliques around shared nannies, family alliances, or whispered rumours of "our parents run the world." Yet Elias never felt fully at ease. There was always an invisible barrier, like he was an actor playing a role he didn't grasp. Teachers treated him with reverence tinged with fear, awarding him accolades with suspicious eagerness. He noticed how, whenever he faced a problem, administrators smoothed it over with a phone call to the Vance household. Around his 15th birthday, the illusions grew starker. A lavish masked ball took place in the mansion, full of guests wearing gold-trimmed masks shaped like falcons, owls, or serpents. Midnight struck, and Elias watched from a hidden balcony as the guests formed a circle around a raised platform. At its centre stood his father, arms outstretched, reciting words in Latin, words about tradition, continuity, and the balance of the bloodline. Then a vow was repeated in unison by the group. Servire ad perpetuam ordinem, serve the perpetual order. That night, his father revealed just enough for Elias to guess at the truth. "We are part of a long lineage that ensures stability in a chaotic world," Victor said, brandy swirling in a crystal glass. "Our family invests in certain endeavours that shape the course of nations. One day, you'll stand in that circle." Elias's stomach churned with questions. But how? Why? Who are these people? His father's stiff posture never wavered. "You'll understand when you come of age." The more Elias listened, the more he recognised that this wasn't mere philanthropy or business networking. It was a system, centuries old, veiled in secrecy, and protected by vast wealth. Each time he tried to raise concerns, Victor dismissed them as youthful ignorance. "You must learn to see the world through the lens of power," he insisted. "The masses can't handle the real illusions. They need their illusions. Democracy, free markets, freedom. We provide it." Elias turned 18 with a swirl of contradictory emotions. A birthday party was staged in a lavish hall, replete with dignitaries, foreign ambassadors, corporate CEOs, almost none of them truly known to him as individuals. They called him Young Master, gave him gifts representing ancient lineages, a ring engraved with arcane symbols, a leather-bound book of codes, a scepter-like baton rumoured to be an artefact from some obscure realm. Instead of joy, Elias felt overshadowed by the legacy they projected onto him. Late that evening, as the last guest departed, Victor summoned him to the old library. Moonlight filtered through stained glass, painting the dusty bookshelves in shifting colours. On the table lay a thick handwritten tome titled Bloodline. Its pages recorded genealogies, secret treaties, references to cryptic events that shaped global politics. Elias thumbed through them, stumbling upon references to wars manipulated from behind the scenes, markets crashed or propped up with hidden funds, elections swayed by strategic leaks. The tome reeked of conspiracy come alive. Victor placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. "You're no longer a child. Today, you join the ranks of those who guard humanity from itself. This is the truth, Elias. The world is run by illusions. Our family is among the illusion's caretakers. It's a burden, but also a privilege." He paused, letting the gravity of the words settle. "Should you betray these secrets, you betray our entire lineage." Elias gazed at the swirling text, heartsick. The illusions he'd glimpsed as a child now crystallized. They were the illusions that shaped governments, economies, and technology itself. But how much suffering had these illusions wrought? The library walls pressed in, heavy with the hush of ancestral watchers, as if the paintings and old busts were silently judging him. He exhaled, nodding his acceptance outwardly, but a kernel of doubt took root. Could a single family, indeed a single global circle, truly claim the right to manipulate billions of lives? Even if they believed it was for stability, who decided how far was too far? That night, Elias tossed in bed, haunted by the vow he'd effectively taken. The sense of destiny weighed on him, yet so did an unspoken conflict. Would he be a caretaker of illusions, or a breaker of them? He drifted off to dreams of shadowy gatherings and puppet strings controlling entire nations. Somewhere in that swirling dreamscape he resolved, I have to learn more. I have to see how deep these roots go, before I can decide my own path. Years passed in a blur of refined academia and stealth training. Under the watchful eye of his father, Victor Vance, Elias mastered the art of measured speech, network building, and clandestine negotiation. He studied finance at an exclusive university, though study was a loose term, given how the professors bent over backward to accommodate him. In parallel, private tutors introduced him to off-the-books lessons, infiltration, cryptography, crisis economics, and psychological manipulation. By age 25, Elias had become a rising star in the family's conglomerate, Vance Global Holdings. He was admired for his visionary approaches, but behind the scenes, he was fulfilling tasks orchestrated by the Circle, the Illuminati, and a council. They assigned him missions, quietly cornering a foreign telecom market to ensure data control in a strategic region, or engineering public opinion through a chain of media acquisitions. Elias performed with efficiency, but each success left a bitter aftertaste. Then came an assignment that tipped the scales of his conscience. The Circle demanded the sabotage of a philanthropic foundation's energy project, which threatened to disrupt the established oil market. The technology offered a cheap, renewable source of power that could empower developing nations, cutting ties to the current global framework. The Circle viewed it as a risk to balance. Elias recognized it as beneficial to humanity. They insisted, stifle it, use lawsuits, smear campaigns, bribed inspections, shut it down. He carried out the sabotage with chilling precision, yet the guilt gnawed at him. Over weeks, the Foundation's labs were raided on spurious legal grounds, their funding dried up overnight, their lead scientist discredited. Watching bright-eyed innovators turned into pariahs twisted Elias's stomach. He saw how easily the Circle's weight could crush hope. One evening, Elias rummaged through a sealed archive in the Vance mansion's depths, a place he'd been warned never to approach. There he found an old digital repository labelled with an innocuous name, Global Project Summaries. Once opened, it revealed hundreds of files referencing orchestrated wars, rigged elections, suppressed cures for diseases, and financial bubbles manufactured then burst at will. Some files dated back decades, others centuries. The earliest ones were accounts of secret alliances that shaped entire dynasties in Europe, coded references to Masonic subgroups, and diaries of men who believed themselves custodians of civilization's destiny. Elias felt as if the ground under him had cracked wide open. The foundation for so many tragedies, famines, conflicts, diseased economies, lay documented in these pages. Each heartbreak in the public sphere might have a hidden impetus traced back to these halls. It was bigger than just his father or one family. This was a multi-generational machine fueled by the arrogance of "we know best." Over the next months, Elias feigned loyalty while quietly copying data onto encrypted drives. He needed someone to confirm the authenticity. That led him to an investigative journalist named Ava Monroe. For years, she'd been delving into conspiracies about a hidden hand shaping global events. Elias reached out under a pseudonym, feeding her small tidbits, like how certain politicians reverse stances overnight after receiving calls from unnamed consultants. Ava was initially skeptical, but the evidence was compelling enough to make her keep listening. They established a clandestine communication line, using obscure cryptographic protocols. Elias would drop file snippets, Ava would parse them, cross-check them with her own leads. Soon, her doubts evaporated. "This is real," she whispered during a voice message. "I've never seen anything this damning." Simultaneously, the Circle assigned Elias to a new mission: help orchestrate a soft regime change in a resource-rich African nation by controlling its currency supply. The plan would topple a democratically elected leader, installing a puppet regime friendly to Western oil interests. Elias felt revulsion. He realized the Circle's illusions came at the cost of countless lives. People starved or lost freedoms so the Circle could keep order. A pivotal turning point arrived when an associate in the Circle casually boasted about orchestrating a minor coup decades prior. The man's arrogance, the callous disregard for human life, jarred Elias. "We do what's necessary," the associate said with a smug grin. "If we let naive do-gooders run amok, the world collapses. We're the watchers on the wall." That was the final straw. Elias decided to not just leak minor details, but to lay bare the entire truth. A complete reveal. He confided in Ava more directly. Though they never met in person, a mutual trust formed through their coded chats. "I'm going to blow the lid on everything," he told her. "I have the archives, decades of conspiracies, proof of global manipulation. Once the world sees it, they can't unsee it." She warned him. "They'll come for you. They may kill you." Elias's jaw clenched. "I know, but it must be done." As his father's next big ceremony approached, a final step in grooming him for a seat on the Circle's inner council, Elias pretended compliance. Meanwhile, Ava quietly enlisted other journalists and whistleblowers, planning an online drop of data timed with Elias's personal video confession. The risk was monumental. The Circle's intelligence networks were vast, but Elias believed in the unstoppable power of truth once unleashed globally. During a private dinner, Victor Vance made a toast to Elias's upcoming induction. "Son, I've never been prouder. Soon you'll stand among the elders, shaping tomorrow." Elias raised his glass, forcing a smile. Beneath the table, his palms sweated. He pictured the thousands of families torn apart by manipulated wars, the innovators silenced, the great leaps in technology withheld for decades. He realized he was about to betray all he was raised to be, and yet it felt like a liberation. That night, alone in his suite, he recorded the first draft of a confession video, He spoke plainly. My name is Elias Vance. My family leads part of a global network that has influenced history's darkest chapters, but I no longer believe in their cause. Here's the evidence. He carefully enumerated key documents, naming names, explaining how resources were controlled, how illusions of democracy were propped up. When he finished, he stared at the camera, heart pounding. This was his truth, laid bare. His phone pinged with a message from Ava. We're ready. Once we get your final go, the entire world sees it. Elias typed back. Tomorrow, after the circle's gathering, I'll send the final file, then there's no turning back. He gazed out the window at the city lights. A hush fell on him, both fear and resolve. The illusions binding him since childhood would soon unravel. He thought of the countless secret ceremonies. The hush in the old corridors was the real hush about to begin, the hush that might follow his final breath. He forced the thought away, focusing on the mission. Let them come, he whispered to the silent room. I'll step into the light no matter the cost. The day of the circle's grand gathering arrived, thick with pomp and tradition. Held in a remote estate rumoured to have once hosted the likes of Templar knights, the event was a swirl of black-tie formality and arcane rites. Elias travelled with his father in a sleek car convoy, every occupant under strict instruction to surrender phones or cameras upon arrival. The Circle's no-technology rule ensured secrecy, but Elias had prepared a subtle workaround. He wore a watch embedded with a covert data transmitter. It looked like a high-end timepiece, but inside was a micro SD card loaded with the entire archive. He'd deliver the final upload command once he stepped away from watchful eyes. The tension pressed on him like a vice. They arrived at twilight. The estate, lit by torches, cast dancing shadows across manicured lawns. Inside, corridors led to a grand hall with a domed ceiling painted with allegorical figures. Gods, angels, demons, all swirling in cosmic battle. Elias's footsteps echoed as he followed his father, who was in an almost euphoric mood. Tonight, Victor said in a low voice, you prove your loyalty to the lineage. I trust no second thoughts plague you. Elias forced a measured nod. I'm ready. But inwardly his heart thundered. He surveyed the hall, men in tailored suits, women in floor-length gowns, each exuding an air of unchallenged dominance. Whispers drifted through the air, plans for economic adjustments, policy alignments, and targeted asset acquisitions, the language of quiet dominion. At the centre, a circular dais, a handful of seats for the elders, Victor Vance among them. Once everyone settled, the ceremony began. Elias watched as the High Elder led a ritual invocation, chanting about guardianship of the grand design, referencing an archaic oath that signified their ancient lineage. Then came the moment for Elias's induction. He stepped forward, forcing composure as the High Elder placed a ring etched with the eye in a triangle onto his finger. Applause followed, polite, measured, and ever so final. He bowed. On the outside, a dutiful scion accepting his inherited role. Inside, a rebel who was about to push the nuclear button of truth. As the formalities concluded, the assembly transitioned to informal discussions, sipping rare wines and analysing current affairs. Elias excused himself to the library, feigning a desire for solitude to reflect. No one questioned it. In that quiet library, he activated his watch's hidden function. The micro SD card inside contained a script set to release the entire trove to global servers, along with a personal video statement. He tapped the watch's face, once, twice, thrice, entering a hidden code. A small LED blinked. A jolt of adrenaline ripped through him. It's happening. The data was beaming to multiple fail-safe servers. Meanwhile, a link was heading to Ava Munro, who'd be ready to disseminate it across decentralized networks, ensuring the world saw it. Within minutes, the illusions of the circle would be laid bare. He took a trembling breath. No turning back now. He pictured the stunned faces that would soon realize the unthinkable betrayal. pictured also the countless innocents who might awaken to the manipulations overshadowing their lives. He prayed the revelations would spark a real shift, not just more confusion. Quiet footsteps behind. He whirled. Victor Vance stood in the doorway, arms folded. "Son," he said quietly, "you seem uneasy. Something you wish to share?" Elias's throat constricted. Did his father suspect? "I'm fine, father. Just overwhelmed by the ceremony." Victor approached, eyes piercing. "Your induction signals more than ceremony. It's about trust. I sense hesitation in you. Are you truly loyal to what we stand for?" The question felt loaded, as though a hidden test. Elias forced steadiness. "I am loyal to the legacy, as I must be," but Victor's gaze hardened. "You must be honest with me. The Council monitors every signal. We have watchers across the net. There was a disturbance in the data flow a moment ago." A chill ran down Elias's spine. He forced an even tone. "Probably just routine disruptions. The estate signal jammers are finicky." A tense silence. Then Victor gestured for Elias to follow him back to the main hall. "Come, we should rejoin the others. We'll see if any anomalies arise." The subtext was clear. If they do, we'll know it's you. Heart pounding, Elias complied. In the hall, guests engaged in hushed conversation. Everyone carried a sense of watchfulness. No overt sign of panic. Maybe the data drop was still in motion. He had to maintain his composure. Soon the circle's illusions would shatter worldwide, and he needed to act normal for as long as possible. 30 minutes into the gathering, a senior council member, a corporate titan, abruptly took a phone call. His expression soured. He conferred with another elder. Small ripples of concern flickered through the crowd. Elias recognized the moment. They discovered the leak. He braced for the storm. Indeed, a murmur spread. Phones beeped discreetly. Some of these powerful figures broke the no-device rule to track global developments. Whispers. Major data breach. Widespread conspiracies. References to the Vance family. Tension soared. The High Elder demanded calm. "We must isolate the source." A hush fell as eyes flickered around, scanning for a traitor. Elias tried not to quake under the suspicion. He caught Victor's gaze, stern, searching. The father realized something was amiss. Then a shot of real fear in his eyes. "He knows it's me," Elias thought. Victor lunged forward, quietly seizing Elias's wrist. "What have you done?" he growled, voice low so the others wouldn't hear. Elias stared back, voice trembling but unwavering. "What had to be done? The world deserves the truth." Victor's face twisted with shock and fury. "You fool! You'll destroy everything we built, our entire lineage." Elias jerked free. In the swirl of chaos, leaders stepping aside to place frantic calls, certain media outlets already responding with fake news disclaimers. He realized it was time to run. He turned on his heel and dashed out. The guard tried to block him, but he weaved past. The entire estate was a blur of alarmed staff, security men shouting, "Stop him!" Elias sprinted across the courtyard, heart hammering. At the gates, he spotted a staff car, engine still running. A stroke of fortune. He jumped behind the wheel and floored it, leaving a swirl of gravel. In the rearview mirror, he glimpsed silhouettes scrambling, uncertain how to respond. They'd never predicted an inside betrayal on this scale. As the estate vanished behind him, a new wave of adrenaline and terror flooded Elias. He was out, but not safe. The Circle's resources spanned nations. Still, if Ava managed to release the files widely enough, the truth was unstoppable. He pictured people across the world seeing the Vance files, reading the suppressed histories, the proof of orchestrated events. Could it spark real change, or would the Circle manage to spin it into a hoax? For the moment, he had to survive. Through a secure line, he tried contacting Ava. No response. Possibly jammed. He pressed on, winding through country roads with the headlights off, hoping to stay hidden until dawn. But even as he fled, the next phase of the Circle's plan likely commenced. They'd brand him a traitor, a fraudster. They might resort to the final solution, erasing him physically. Trembling behind the wheel, he whispered a silent plea to the night. Please, let the leak make a difference. Because if the Circle caught him, all that awaited was an unmarked grave, and the illusions would persist unchallenged. Elias spent the next week in frantic motion, ducking from safe house to safe house. Contacts he once trusted fell silent, presumably coerced or threatened by the Circle. Only Ava Monroe remained a faint lifeline, exchanging messages through dead-drop emails and burner phones. She confirmed the data was out, but mainstream media was calling it an elaborate hoax. Meanwhile, certain government figures were quietly investigating. The crack was there, but the Circle was patching it fast. A swirl of rumours erupted online. Some claimed to see the leaked files, grainy screenshots of documents linking the Vance name to covert war funding. Others declared the entire scandal was deep fake mania. Troll armies labelled Elias a disgruntled black sheep. The Circle's spin machine roared into full gear. The public sphere turned into a battleground of confusion. During a hushed phone call, Ava revealed an attempt on her life, a suspicious car accident she narrowly avoided. She believed it was no coincidence. They were cleaning up. Don't trust anything. Elias steeled himself, fully aware the Circle would hunt him next. He resolved to finalise an in-person meeting with Ava, away from prying digital eyes, to strategise the next wave of leaks. But the Circle anticipated that. Late one night, a coded text arrived from an unknown number. Escape route secured. Plane to Iceland. You'll be safe. Elias recognised a trick. Why would someone spontaneously offer him a flight? Nonetheless, an hour later, Ava confirmed she too arranged a plane to Iceland. Coincidence or infiltration? Time was too short to be sure. He had to risk it. Iceland was rumoured to be a stronghold for data activists, out of the Circle's immediate reach. He arrived at the private airstrip under darkness, greeted by a lone pilot who addressed him by name. No sign of Ava, but she had indicated she'd join him. The plane, a sleek jet with minimal marking, seemed in order. Perhaps the plan was for her to meet him at the secure location. Warily, Elias boarded, scanning the cabin for any hidden threats. If this was a trap, he'd have limited recourse at 35,000 feet. The engines roared to life, the pilot offering clipped responses. The takeoff was smooth, the city lights receding below. Elias tried to calm his silverwolves, remembering that once he reached Iceland, he could coordinate a bigger push for the files. Freed from direct Circle influence, maybe the story would catch global traction. He peered at his phone, no signal, as expected. He typed an offline note to Ava. If we're parted, keep fighting. I'll find you. A pit formed in his stomach, a sense of finality creeping over him. An hour into flight, turbulence rocked the plane. Elias strapped in. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. Mild weather front ahead. Shouldn't be an issue. But the shaking intensified. Then came a sharp beep from the cockpit. Elias stood, heading forward to see what was wrong. The pilot looked tense, fiddling with controls. We're losing instrumentation, he muttered. Systems glitch. Possibly sabotage. Elias's blood ran cold. A sabotage at 20,000 feet spelled doom. Outside the window, lightning flashed across swirling clouds. The plane rattled dangerously. We have to land, Elias said, panic rising. The pilot nodded, broadcasting a mayday. But the radio cuttered with static. No response. It's like our comms are jammed. Another quake shuddered the fuselage, and an alarm blared. The pilot tried adjusting altitude, but the plane veered starboard, losing stability. Elias's mind raced. Was this the Circle's final solution? crashing the plane under the guise of mechanical failure. He could almost see Victor Vance's stoic face pronouncing, "No traitor shall live." The pilot cursed, fighting the controls, sweat pouring. "We're going down, I can't regain flight systems." Elias seized the emergency radio, repeating the mayday on different frequencies. Silence. A flicker of hope came when a scratchy voice responded, some distant air traffic controller. Then it cut off abruptly, possibly jammed again. The plane pitched downward, engines whining in protest. Time slowed. Elias's heart hammered in his chest. He braced himself in a seat, fastening every belt he could. A series of jarring lurches, the lights flickering. The altimeter spun wildly. A horrifying thought. Even if I survive the crash, the circle might finish me anyway. But no time for that. The pilot shouted, "Brace! Brace! Brace!" Then everything dissolved into a cacophony of shrieking metal and sashing impact. A swirl of chaos overtook Elias, searing pain, the sense of tumbling, seatbelts constricting, an explosive noise. Darkness swallowed him, though he vaguely registered the plane tearing into what felt like open water. Water flooded the cabin, freezing cold. Bizarre hush followed. Am I alive? For a moment he drifted in watery oblivion, lungs burning. Something in him refused to surrender. He fumbled, found a breach in the fuselage, forcing himself out. The sharp edges cut into him. His vision blurred with salt water and the strobing light of a single emergency beacon. Then blackness again. Hours later, maybe minutes, maybe days, he woke on a scrap of drift material battered by ocean waves. The plane was nowhere to be seen. The pilot was gone. The night sky loomed overhead, stars swirling. Every nerve screamed in pain. A savage cough seized his chest. Alive? But how long? He clung to consciousness, an internal refrain repeating, "Don't let them win. Don't let them bury the truth." Then a faint noise, an approaching vessel. The lines between dream and reality blurred. He remembered Ava's words about a decoy plan, how sometimes flight manifests were altered. Could she have orchestrated something? But memory flickered out. Next time he stirred, morning light glinted on rolling waves, and no sign of rescue. This is it. With what little strength remained, he mentally recited the conspiracies he'd exposed. Even if he died now, the data was out. Someone might keep it alive. The final thought that flickered. Ava, she must live. She must carry on. Then darkness overcame him again. In the official news cycle, reports surfaced. Private jet crash, business air, Elias Vance presumed dead. Coverage was fleeting. Mechanical failure was blamed. Investigations concluded swiftly. Meanwhile, some corners of the internet seethed with speculation. Was it sabotage? The Vance family offered sorrowful statements, but made no mention of any conspiracy. Another tragic accident, overshadowed by bigger headlines a day later. Time ebbed forward, the public's attention shifting. People obsessed over new celebrity scandals, fresh political bickering, financial flux. The tragedy of Elias Vance receded to a faint memory in the mainstream. Officially, no remains were recovered, though a funeral was held, a solemn affair. The global elite paid stiff-lipped respects. Victor Vance stood stoic, offering no sign of paternal grief to the cameras, only a short statement about honouring my son's memory. But in shadowy corners of the digital realm, rumours festered. Bits and pieces of the Vance files still circulated, though the circle poured resources into discrediting them. Websites hosting the data vanished overnight, domain ownership revoked. Social media flagged the leaks as fabricated. A wave of so-called experts insisted the documents were AI-generated illusions, fueling an ironically conspiratorial explanation. People debated fervently, never certain of the truth. Ava Monroe lived in a precarious twilight. She had survived because she never boarded that private jet, suspects directing a trap. Instead, she'd orchestrated a fallback plan with Elias. If he vanished, she'd become the guardian of the remaining files. She harboured a flicker of hope that Elias might still be alive. But as weeks turned to months, that hope dimmed. She hammered at her keyboard day and night, refining new ways to leak the data. She published carefully on obscure platforms, encouraging smaller investigative reporters to pick up threads. But each time a thread gained traction, the Circle's countermeasures snuffed it out. One day she received an unmarked package at her secret hideout. Inside lay a battered watch, Elias's watch, the same device that had transmitted the entire trove. A note accompanied it. "He tried, now it's your turn." No sender details. Had some fisherman found it? Did Elias toss it into the sea? Ava's heart clenched. She slid the watch onto her wrist, vowing to never let the story fade. In the broader world, the immediate reaction to the leak gave way to cynicism. People were bombarded with so many conspiracies, so many digital illusions, that truth felt intangible. Some believed wholeheartedly, forming small protest movements that scrawled Elias lives on walls. Others shrugged it off as yet another internet hoax. Many felt powerless, concluding that even if the Illuminati existed, what could they do? Behind closed doors, the Circle continued its centuries-old rituals and manipulations. Their media arms downplayed the scandal with cunning skill. Politicians under their sway introduced new laws to combat disinformation, ironically, making it easier to silence genuine whistleblowers. Victor the Vance kept a silent grip on his empire, the only external sign of personal turmoil being the occasional mention of family tragedy. In private, he raged at the memory of his son's treachery, yet also mourned the loss of his heir. Contradictions churned in him, the father who valued control over love. But Elias's memory didn't die. Beneath the illusions, pockets of believers formed. They traded the Vance files in offline meetups, analysing them page by page. Some cross-checked references to old events, coups, assassinations, suppressed technologies, and found them aligned too well with recorded history to be random. The seeds of doubt in the official narrative sprouted. Watered by the memory of Elias Vance, months later in a distant city's graffiti-laced alley, an artist painted a mural. Elias's face with an outstretched hand holding a candle flame captioned, "He exposed the light." Social media posts about the mural popped up, promptly overshadowed by cat videos or trending hashtags. Yet some paused to admire it. They'd heard the conspiracies swirling about him, the boy born into power who dared to blow the whistle. Even if they remained uncertain, the mural reminded them that sometimes power is indeed challenged from within. Ava Munro quietly made contact with a growing circle of independent journos. She slipped them curated subsets of the data, forging alliances with cryptographers, historians, and ex-intelligence folks. Little by little, a mosaic formed that was too compelling to ignore, too persistent to bury. In certain academic circles, these revelations sparked cautious debate on how global events might have been manipulated by an elite. A few dared to reference the Vance phenomenon, linking it with centuries of rumoured secret societies. In the end, the world didn't erupt in immediate revolution. But fissures in the facade deepened. Governments found themselves under pressure, forced to deny or deflect. The Circle pushed back with heavier propaganda. People felt the tension, but couldn't quite name the puppet masters. The hush around Elias's story ironically gave it a spectral power. He became an almost mythical figure who might have been the only scion to risk everything for the truth. Some called him misguided, others deemed him a hero. And in an unremarkable house hidden on a quiet coastline, Ava stashed a final hard drive labelled Eve Legacy, containing the unedited transcripts of Elias's confession. She penned a note. "If you find this, you hold the future. He died so people could see what hides in the dark. Don't waste it." Occasionally she flipped through old messages from Elias, his sense of humour, his sincerity, and the heartbreak in his voice when describing the Circle's manipulations. She'd wonder if, in another timeline, he survived and they triumphed together. But real life seldom grants neat endings. The fight continued, messy and uncertain. Still, she pressed on, because once you peer behind the curtain of illusions, you can't pretend ignorance. Elias Vance had gazed upon centuries of orchestrated power and decided to break the chain. They silenced his body, but not the echoes of his truth. And though the Illuminati might remain formidable, a small but determined fraction of humanity now carried the spark he lit. The hush in the corridors of power might never vanish fully, but it quivered under the growing weight of knowledge that refused to be caged. That is the story of the boy who exposed the light. He inherited a destiny meant to keep the world in a hush, yet he chose to speak. And in that choice, gave the world a glimpse of the grand illusions shaping their lives. His memory lingers in coded forums, whispered meetings, rebellious art and midnight reflections, and perhaps in time the illusions will crumble. Until then, the name Elias Vance stands as a candle in the darkness, a testament to the price of truth and the resilience of those who dare to speak it. Some say it's based on classified information that was never meant to reach public ears. Tonight we explore the darkest corners of government experimentation and the thin membrane between dimensions. Daniel Cross bolted upright in his bed, sweat-drenched sheets twisted around his legs like restraints. The dream had returned, more vivid this time. Underground tunnels bathed in pulsing blue light, the cold metal chair, the leather straps on his wrists, and the voices, always the voices, echoing through concrete chambers. Subject 17 demonstrates exceptional receptivity, increased neural amplitude by 30%. His bedroom television flickered with static, though he was certain he'd turned it off before going to sleep. From within the dancing grey pixels came a familiar hum, a sequence of tones just below normal hearing threshold. Something about it pulled at the corners of his mind, like fingers trying to pry open a locked door. Daniel stumbled out of bed and approached the screen, mesmerised. Within the chaos of white noise, patterns emerged, geometric formations that shouldn't exist in random static. His reflection in the screen looked foreign, almost like another person watching him from behind the glass. "Delta Protocol 17, he whispered, the words rising unbidden from some hidden chamber of memory. "Initiate phase bend." The static intensified, the hum growing to an electric whine that made his fillings ache. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the television went black. Daniel stood there, trembling in the dark, wondering why tears were streaming down his face. In the morning, he convinced himself it had been nothing but a particularly vivid nightmare. But as he brushed his teeth, he noticed something unsettling in the bathroom mirror. A small red mark behind his ear, perfectly circular, like a healed puncture wound. He had no memory of receiving it. As the days passed, the dreams intensified. Always the same elements. The underground facility, scientists in lab coats, the chair with its cruel restraints, and tests. Endless tests designed to push the boundaries of his mind. In each dream he was younger, perhaps 11 or 12 years old. But the strangest part was the location that kept appearing in the background of these fractured memories. A distinctive radar tower rising against a darkening sky. When not at work coding security algorithms for a defense contractor, Daniel found himself obsessively drawing the tower, trying to place where he might have seen it before. His apartment walls became covered with sketches, the tower from different angles, the curved coastline it overlooked, strange symbols that his hand seemed to produce without conscious direction. His colleague Martin noticed the change in him first. "You look like hell, Dan," he said over lunch one day. "Not sleeping?" Daniel hesitated. "Just some weird dreams." "About what?" "I don't know, some kind of facility. Tests. A radar tower by the ocean." Martin's plastic fork paused halfway to his mouth. "What kind of tower?" "An FPS-35, Cold War era, massive thing with a distinctive cowling. Daniel blinked, surprised at his own precise knowledge. Martin set down his fork. That's oddly specific for a dream. I know, and there's something else. Daniel lowered his voice. Sometimes when there's static on the TV I hear something, like a signal. What does it say? It doesn't speak. It's more like a beacon, calling me somewhere. Martin studied him for a long moment. You ever heard of Camp Hero? Out in Montauk? The name sent an electric shiver down Daniel's spine. His coffee cup slipped from suddenly numb fingers, shattering on the floor. Jesus, you okay? Martin asked, jumping back from the spreading puddle. I need to go there, Daniel whispered, staring at nothing. Montauk. The drive to Long Island took 4 hours, but to Daniel it felt like returning from an exile that had lasted decades. As he crossed into the township of Montauk, a pressure began building behind his eyes. Not quite pain, but an insistent awareness, like the sensation before a sneeze that never comes. The roads grew narrower, pine forests pressing in on both sides. His GPS lost signal twice, but Daniel found he didn't need it. His hands seemed to know which turns to take, guiding the car along increasingly remote routes until the trees gave way to scrubland, and beyond that, the Atlantic stretched to the horizon. And there it stood, exactly as he'd drawn it 100 times, the massive radar tower of Camp Hero, its distinctive silhouette rising against the pale blue sky. The abandoned Air Force Base sprawled beneath it, a collection of bunker-like buildings and concrete structures designed to withstand Soviet bombs that never fell. According to the weathered sign at the entrance, Camp Hero was now a state park, its military function long obsolete. But something about the perimeter fence looked too new, the security cameras too well maintained for a simple historic site. Daniel parked in the nearly empty lot and approached the visitor centre, a converted military building with peeling green paint. Inside, a bored park ranger glanced up from her crossword puzzle. "Closing in an hour," she said without preamble. "I was wondering what you could tell me about the history of this place," Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice casual despite the hammering of his heart. "Standard Cold War radar station, decommissioned in the early 70s. She pushed a pamphlet across the counter. "Self-guided tour maps there. Stick to the marked trails." "What about the underground sections?" The ranger's crossword pencil stopped mid-letter. Her eyes flicked up to study him more carefully. "There aren't any underground sections open to the public, but they exist. Look, mister, this is just an old radar station. If you're one of those conspiracy nuts." "I've been here before," Daniel interrupted, surprising himself. "When I was a child, not possible. This place was sealed military property until 92. Daniel leaned forward. "What about the Montauk project?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The ranger's face hardened as she set down her pencil and reached for the phone. "Park's closing early today. You need to leave." "I just have a few questions." "Now," she said, her finger hovering over the keypad. "Or I call security." Daniel retreated to his car, the pamphlet clutched in his hand. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he noticed a black SUV with government plates turning in. The man in the passenger seat photographed his license plate as they passed. Instead of leaving, Daniel drove to the public beach adjacent to the former base. From there, he followed a trail that hugged the dramatic bluffs overlooking the Atlantic. The radar tower remained visible above the tree line, seeming to watch him as he walked. When he reached a chain-link fence marking the base's boundary, Daniel felt a strange duality, his conscious mind seeing it for the first time, while something deeper recognized every rust spot and bent link. He knew, without understanding how, that 20 yards to the left, the fence had been repaired where someone had once cut through it. Sure enough, when he checked, there was a section of newer fencing exactly where he'd expected. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Daniel found a secluded spot where the bluff had partially collapsed, creating a natural path down to a narrow strip of beach. The base's concrete seawall extended here, covered in graffiti and eroded by decades of salt spray. He ran his hand along the rough surface until his fingers caught on something, a small recess containing what appeared to be a rusted electrical box. Without hesitation, Daniel entered a sequence of numbers, 8-1-3-5. Nothing happened. He tried again with 8315, and then finally 8153. A deep mechanical groan emanated from within the wall. A section of concrete, expertly disguised as part of the seawall, shifted inward by several inches. Daniel pushed, and it swung open on hidden hinges to reveal a dark passage leading into the earth. The smell that wafted out was a complex mixture of mildew, ozone, and something chemical that triggered an intense wave of déjà vu. Daniel switched on his phone's flashlight and stepped inside. The passage sloped downward, concrete walls giving way to rough-hewn stone that glistened with moisture. Daniel moved cautiously, guided more by buried memory than by sight. After about 50 yards, the tunnel opened into a larger space, what appeared to be an abandoned maintenance room filled with rusted equipment and collapsed shelving. But Daniel knew this wasn't its original purpose. He directed his light toward the far wall, where a heavy metal door hung partially ajar. Beyond it lay darkness so absolute it seemed to swallow his flashlight beam. As he approached the threshold, a wave of dizziness overcame him. Fractured images flashed through his mind. Children in hospital gowns, scientists with clipboards, a massive chair surrounded by electronic equipment, and always, the tests. Focus on the light, Daniel. Tell us what you see through the gateway. His phone slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor as Daniel collapsed. The last thing he saw before consciousness fled was a symbol scratched into the metal door, a triangle intersecting with a perfect circle. When he awoke, Daniel was lying on the beach, waves lapping at his feet. The sun had set, and stars glittered in the darkening sky. His clothes were soaked with seawater, though he had no memory of entering the ocean. His phone was gone. And most disturbing of all, the entrance in the seawall had vanished, not just closed, but seemingly never there at all. Daniel stumbled to his feet, disoriented. His watch showed it was just past 9 p.m, but the date displayed was wrong. According to his watch, he had lost nearly 3 days. The drive back to his apartment in Connecticut was a blur, a dreamlike passage through darkness punctuated by the hypnotic sweep of headlights. Daniel's mind churned with fragments of memory that couldn't possibly be his, yet felt more authentic than his recollections of college or his first job. He remembered the chair, the Montauk chair they'd called it, a monstrous assemblage of technology salvaged from alien craft and enhanced with Tesla-inspired circuitry. He remembered the sensation when they activated it with him strapped inside, like his consciousness was being pulled through the top of his skull and stretched across dimensions. And he remembered what they made him do with it. Back in his apartment, Daniel paced until dawn, scribbling everything he could recall into a notebook. Names surfaced: Doctor, Marcus Bennett, the project lead with cold blue eyes, Cameron Hayes, the military liaison who always smelled of cigarettes and cheap cologne, and Preston Nichols, the reluctant technician who sometimes snuck the children candy bars when the others weren't looking. Preston Nichols. The name felt important. When morning came, Daniel called in sick to work and drove to the nearest public library. The librarian gave him an odd look when he asked if they had anything on the Montauk project, but directed him to their small collection of conspiracy literature. There, sandwiched between books on Roswell and MKUltra, was a worn paperback. The Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, by Preston B. Nichols and Peter Moon. Daniel's hands trembled as he flipped through pages describing exactly what he'd been remembering. The secret installation at Camp Hero, the psychic experiments, the Montauk chair, even the alleged success in manipulating the fabric of time and space. According to Nichols, the Montauk project was the continuation of the Philadelphia experiment, another rumoured government program that supposedly made a naval destroyer, the USS Eldridge, temporarily invisible and teleported it from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia in 1943. The book claimed the Montauk project had been shuttered after an incident in 1983 when a monstrous manifestation, dubbed the Beast, had been psychically pulled through a dimensional gateway. The creature had wreaked havoc before the power was cut and the project abandoned. But Daniel knew this wasn't entirely true. The project hadn't ended. It had evolved. The techniques refined at Montauk had been incorporated into other programs, dispersed across multiple sites to ensure no single failure could expose the entire operation. Back at his apartment, Daniel found himself standing before his closet, staring at a locked metal box on the top shelf. He had no memory of putting it there, yet he knew exactly what it contained. The key was taped underneath his dresser, precisely where some part of him expected it to be. Inside the box was a US Bank safety deposit key. The following morning, Daniel presented himself at First National Bank in downtown Hartford. He provided the key along with his ID, and the manager escorted him to the vault. When they were alone with the metal drawer extracted from the wall, Daniel opened it with a sense of inevitability. Inside lay a manila envelope, sealed with red security tape bearing federal classifications he shouldn't have had access to. He broke the seal and emptied the contents onto the small table. Photographs spilled out, black and white images of children in a sterile facility. In several, Daniel recognised his younger self, perhaps 10 years old, wired to various machines. In one particularly disturbing image, he sat in a massive chair surrounded by Tesla coils and computer banks, his small form almost swallowed by the ominous apparatus. There were documents too, partial research notes, diagrams of the Montauk chair annotated with equations that made his eyes hurt to look at, and a map of Camp Hero with underground sections marked in red. At the bottom of the pile lay a compact disc in a paper sleeve, unmarked except for a date. August 12th, 1983, the day of the alleged Beast incident. Most chilling of all was a typed list of names under the heading Project Subjects Delta Group. His own name appeared with a designation that turned his blood cold. Subject 17, Primary Gate Opener. That night, with shaking hands, Daniel loaded the disc into his laptop. After whirring for several seconds, the screen displayed a single video file. The footage was grainy, security camera quality. It showed a concrete room dominated by the chair he'd been drawing obsessively. A boy, himself, was strapped into it, electrodes attached to his temples. Men in lab coats monitored equipment while military personnel stood guard at the doors. A voice off camera counted down, initiating Delta Protocol in 3, 2, 1. The lights in the facility dimmed as power surged to the chair. Young Daniel's body went rigid, his back arching impossibly as his eyes rolled back. Equipment sparked and smoked. Several technicians backed away nervously. Then, at the centre of the room, the air itself seemed to tear open. A writhing black void that pulsed like a living thing. From within that impossible darkness, something began to emerge. The camera feed distorted violently, static washing across the screen. When the image stabilised, chaos had erupted. People were screaming, running. Blood spattered one of the walls. And at the edge of the frame, partially obscured, was a glimpse of something that couldn't exist in our reality. A mass of shifting geometries and impossible angles that hurt to look at. The final clear image before the video cut to static. Young Daniel staring directly into the camera. Blood streaming from his nose and ears, mouth moving to form words that seemed addressed to his future self. You have to shut it down before it opens again. Daniel ejected the disc with numb fingers, his mind reeling. Not just from what he'd seen, but from what was happening inside his head. Memories crystallizing, filling in gaps he hadn't known existed. He remembered now. All of it. The next day he called the only person who might understand. The number was etched in his memory, though he couldn't recall ever learning it. "Hello?" The voice that answered was aged, cautious. "Is this Preston Nichols?" A long pause. "Who's asking?" "My name is Daniel Cross. I was Subject 17 at Montauk." The silence that followed lasted so long that Daniel thought the connection had been lost. Finally the old man spoke, his voice a haunted whisper. "God help you, boy. They're still watching. I need answers. Not over the phone. They're always listening." Another pause. "The lighthouse. Tomorrow. Noon." The line went dead. Daniel arrived at the Montauk Point lighthouse an hour early, parking his rental car. He'd abandoned his own vehicle, suddenly paranoid about tracking devices, in the tourist lot. The historic lighthouse stood tall against a sky heavy with approaching storm clouds, its red and white stripes a cheerful contrast to the grim purpose of his visit. He spotted Nichols immediately, a heavy-set older man in a worn fisherman's jacket sitting alone on a bench overlooking the Atlantic. As Daniel approached, Nichols didn't turn but spoke as if continuing a conversation already in progress. "They told us we were serving our country," he said, eyes fixed on the churning waves below. "Advancing human potential, opening frontiers. What a load of horse shit." Daniel sat beside him. "You were there. You helped them. And I've spent 40 years trying to make up for it." Nichols finally turned to look at him, his weathered face a map of regret. "Jesus. You grew up. Last time I saw you, you were just a skinny kid with too much power in your head. What did they do to me?" Nichols sighed, reaching into his pocket for a pack of cigarettes. His hands trembled slightly as he lit one. "You were special, even among the sensitives. Most of the children could receive impressions, maybe move small objects, but you could create doorways. Doorways to where? That was the question, wasn't it? At first, they were just focused on remote viewing, psychically observing distant locations. Then they realized some of you kids could not just see, but reach. And you, Daniel, you could open gates that others could step through." The old man took a long drag from his cigarette. "They started small, different rooms in the facility, then different points in time, just minutes at first, then hours, then years. By 82, they had you opening doorways to other places entirely." "The beast," Daniel said quietly. Nichols' face went ashen. "You remember?" "I found a recording." "Then you know what happened. What came through wasn't from another place on Earth, not even from another time. It was from somewhere else, somewhere that operates under different physical laws." Nichols stubbed out his cigarette with more force than necessary. "We lost 16 people that day before they cut the power. And the thing, it didn't die. It just folded back into dimensions we can't perceive." Daniel's head throbbed with half-formed memories. "They shut it down after that." "Officially, yes. The Montauk project was terminated, the facility sealed. But you know better, don't you?" Nichols fixed him with a penetrating stare. "They just went deeper underground, compartmentalized. The work continued." "But I don't remember anything after that day. I have a whole life. School, college, my job. Artificial memories, very sophisticated. The best MK Ultra techniques combined with targeted chemical therapy. They built you a new identity, brick by brick." Nichols glanced around nervously. "The question is, why are you remembering now?" "The programming doesn't just break down on its own." Before Daniel could respond, his vision split, like a double exposure photograph. Overlaid on the present scene was another image. The same lighthouse, but under clear blue skies, with Nichols wearing different clothes. "Happening again," Nichols was saying, his voice echoing strangely as the two realities flickered and merged. "The temporal distortions are getting worse." Daniel gripped the bench, nauseated by the visual discord. "What's happening to me? Time is bleeding through. Your connection to the Montauk chair never fully severed. It just went dormant." Nichols leaned closer, his face shifting subtly between older and younger versions of himself. Listen carefully. There's an access point they never sealed. Bunker 14 near the old power station. The equipment is still there. You need to... The world around them rippled like disturbed water. A crushing pressure built inside Daniel's skull as reality itself seemed to stutter. When it stabilized, Nichols was gone. In his place sat a teenage boy with a familiar face. Nichols, 50 years younger, wearing a Camp Hero security badge. Find the failsafe before it's too late, the boy continued in Nichols' elderly voice, seemingly unaware of his transformed state. They're trying to recreate the conditions from 83, but they don't understand the danger. The membrane between worlds is thinner now, weakened by the original experiments. The young Nichols flickered and was replaced by the old man again. He clutched Daniel's arm with surprising strength. Go back to Camp Hero, find Bunker 14, destroy the chair before they can use it again. Another wave of temporal distortion washed over them. When it passed, Daniel was alone on the bench. A family of tourists walked by, giving him curious looks as he sat there, pale and shaking. That night, Daniel returned to Camp Hero under cover of darkness. The perimeter fence posed little challenge. He remembered where the security systems had blind spots, knowledge surfacing from decades past. The ranger station was dark and empty. He made his way through the abandoned base, guided by memories that grew stronger with each step. The power station stood silent, its massive turbines long still. Behind it, half hidden by encroaching vegetation, was a small concrete structure with a faded 14 stenciled on its rusted door. The lock had been broken recently. Inside, a metal staircase descended into darkness. Daniel followed it down, the beam of his flashlight illuminating walls that transitioned from concrete to natural bedrock. The air grew colder, charged with an electrical scent that made the hairs on his arms stand up. At the bottom, a long corridor stretched before him. As he walked, temporal distortions intensified. In flashes he saw the corridor as it had been, brightly lit, staffed by busy technicians and armed guards. He heard snippets of conversation from 40 years ago, saw ghostly figures pass through him as past and present overlapped. The corridor ended at a massive vault door standing partially open. Beyond it lay the heart of the Montauk project, a cavernous chamber housing equipment that should have been removed decades ago. And at its centre stood the chair. Even inactive, it radiated a sense of wrongness, a technology that should not exist, built from principles science had yet to discover. Surrounding it were banks of computers and equipment in various states of repair. Some appeared anciently obsolete, others looked surprisingly modern. Most disturbing of all were the signs of recent activity. Fresh cables ran to newly installed equipment, toolboxes lay open on workbenches, and a whiteboard was covered with complex equations and a countdown schedule. According to the board, whatever they were planning would happen tomorrow night. As Daniel approached the chair, his consciousness began to splinter. He was simultaneously his present self and his child self, experiencing both timelines at once. In one reality, he stood before the dormant machine as an adult. In the other, he was strapped into it as technicians calibrated its settings. "Good morning, Daniel," said a voice from both past and present. "We've been waiting for you to return." Daniel turned to find Dr. Bennett stepping from the shadows, older now, his hair silver instead of brown, but with the same cold blue eyes. "You," Daniel whispered, "you're still running this. Did you think we'd abandon the most important scientific breakthrough in human history?" Bennett circled him slowly. "Especially after what you showed us was possible. You need to shut this down. You don't understand what you're doing." "On the contrary, we understand far better now." Bennett gestured to the upgraded equipment. "We've spent 40 years refining the technology, studying the data from the original experiments. The incident in 83 was a momentary setback. 16 people died. Progress requires sacrifice." Bennett's voice hardened. And now you've returned, exactly as our models predicted. The prodigal son drawn back at precisely the right moment. Daniel backed away, moving toward the chair. I came to destroy it. You came because you're still connected to it, because on a quantum level, you've never left that chair. Bennett nodded to someone behind Daniel. Your memories, your independent life, they were never real. Just a holding pattern while your mind matured into what we needed. Too late, Daniel sensed movement behind him. A sharp pain blossomed in his neck as a hypodermic needle sank into his flesh. The room tilted sideways as the sedative took hold. "Welcome home, Subject 17, Bennett said as darkness closed in. "Tomorrow, you'll help us open the ultimate doorway." Daniel awoke strapped to the chair, electrodes attached to his temples and chest. The bunker hummed with power, banks of equipment manned by technicians in white lab coats. Armed guards stood at attention along the walls. His mind felt clearer than it had in days. The chemical fog of suppressed memories finally lifted. He remembered everything now. His childhood, the tests, the growing fear among the scientists as they realized what they'd discovered, and most of all the true nature of what had come through the gate in 1983. Dr. Bennett approached, clipboard in hand. "Consciousness has returned. Excellent. We have limited time before the window aligns." "You can't do this," Daniel said, straining against his restraints. "You saw what happened last time. A miscalculation. The entity was unstable in our dimensional framework." Bennett checked readings on a nearby monitor. "This time we're better prepared. The integration will be controlled." "Integration?" Cold horror spread through Daniel's chest. "You're not just opening a doorway. You want to bring something through permanently?" Bennett's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Not something, Daniel. Someone. Or perhaps, more accurately, someone's." He gestured toward a large display screen where images flashed in a rapid sequence. Advanced technology, biological enhancements, weapons beyond current human capability. Our visitors have so much to offer. Knowledge, power, evolutionary advancement. Bennett adjusted a dial, increasing power to the chair. All they ask in return is a suitable environment, hosts who can withstand the integration process. "They're not visitors," Daniel said, the truth crystallizing in his mind. "They're invaders, and you're giving them the door code." Bennett ignored him, addressing the technicians. "Begin the initialization sequence. Power to 70%. The chair hummed to life, vibrating subtly beneath Daniel. Familiar sensations flooded his consciousness. The stretching feeling, as if his mind were being pulled from his body and extended across unseen dimensions. On monitors around the room, waveforms pulsed and danced. A technician called out readings. Quantum tunneling effect established. Temporal aperture forming. Daniel closed his eyes, focusing inward. They thought they were in control, using him as a tool, but they'd forgotten something crucial, something even he had only just remembered. He wasn't just a key to open the door, he was the doorway itself. In 1983, when the beast had emerged, young Daniel had done something desperate in the final moments. He'd imprinted a failsafe into the quantum structure of the chair, a back door that only he could access. As the power built around him, Daniel reached into that hidden channel, his consciousness expanding beyond the confines of normal space-time. He could feel them waiting on the other side, vast intelligences, ancient and patient, pressing against the membrane between worlds like fingers testing a soap bubble's strength. And they were hungry. "Aperture at 60%, called a technician. "Dimensional breach imminent." Bennett leaned over Daniel, voice low and eager. "Can you feel them? They've waited so long to meet us properly." "Yes," Daniel whispered, his eyes still closed. "I can feel them, but they're not what you think." "Power surge," shouted a technician. "Systems drawing more than input capacity," Bennett whirled. "That's impossible. Check the—" "It's me," Daniel said, his voice oddly calm as blood began to trickle from his nose. "I'm the power source now. I always was." Around the room, equipment sparked and smoked. Lights flickered as power drained from all systems toward the chair. The metal beneath Daniel grew hot enough to scorch his skin, but he barely noticed the pain. At the centre of the room, air began to twist and distort, reality folding like origami into impossible geometries. Through the forming aperture came glimpses of a realm beyond human comprehension, vast architectures that defied Euclidean space, entities composed of light and thought rather than matter. "Yes!" Bennett exulted, oblivious to the danger. "It's working!" A technician grabbed his arm. "Sir, the subject's brainwave patterns are altering the protocol. He's changing the coordinates." "Override him. Cut direct neural input." "We can't. He's bypassed the safeguards." Daniel opened his eyes, now glowing with an inner light that cast no shadows. When he spoke, his voice reverberated with harmonics that made glass surfaces throughout the bunker vibrate. "I'm not opening a door for them to come here," he said. "I'm creating a vacuum, a one-way passage." The aperture grew, swirling darkness shot through with impossible colours. Air rushed toward it in a howling vortex. Loose objects began sliding across the floor. "What are you doing?" Bennett screamed over the maelstrom. "What I should have done 40 years ago!" Daniel's restraint snapped as his body lifted slightly from the chair, suspended by forces beyond conventional physics. "I'm collapsing the bridge between worlds, permanently." The suction intensified. A guard lost his footing and slid screaming into the vortex, his body stretching bizarrely before vanishing. Others clutched desperately at bolted-down equipment. "You'll destroy everything!" Bennett clawed his way toward a control panel. "Only the infection," Daniel replied. "The chair, the technology, the knowledge, everything that came through, everything that doesn't belong in our reality." With a sound like the universe tearing, the aperture expanded to engulf the chair itself. Metal warped and stretched as it was pulled into the void. Equipment imploded, circuitry unravelling at the atomic level as fundamental forces rewrote themselves around the collapsing gateway. Bennett made a final desperate lunge toward Daniel, face contorted with rage. "We were so close!" As the doctor's fingers brushed his arm, Daniel felt a moment of genuine pity. They were never going to share, Doctor. We weren't potential allies. We were cattle. The floor beneath them buckled as structural supports failed. Chunks of ceiling crashed down as the entire bunker began to collapse inward toward the hungry void. In the final moments before consciousness fled, Daniel saw something massive beginning to emerge from the aperture, not entering our world but being pulled back to its own. The beast of Montauk, returning to its native dimension after 40 years of patient waiting in the spaces between worlds. Its vast form registered in his human perception only as impressions, countless eyes, geometries that hurt to comprehend, and a telepathic voice that bypassed his ears to resonate directly in his mind. "You have closed the way. But there are other doors, other keys." As darkness claimed him, Daniel directed one final surge of power into the collapsing gateway, sealing it with his consciousness as the lock. Daniel awoke to the rhythmic beeping of hospital monitors. Sunlight streamed through Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across starched white sheets. His body felt leaden, every movement requiring conscious effort. A nurse noticed he was awake and summoned a doctor. A kindly-faced woman who explained he had been found unconscious on the beach near Montauk Point, severely dehydrated and suffering from exposure. He had been in a coma for 6 days. When she asked what had happened to him, Daniel claimed not to remember. 3 days later, he checked himself out against medical advice. His apartment, when he returned to it, had been searched with professional thoroughness, nothing obviously disturbed, but he could feel the intrusion like a psychic fingerprint on every surface. His computer was gone. So were his notebooks, filled with memories and sketches. In their place sat a slim manila folder containing a single document, a government position offer with the Department of Energy at a salary triple his current one. The message was clear: forget what happened, take the money, live a comfortable life under watchful eyes. Daniel burned the offer and set to work. Over the next week he purchased equipment from various sources: a high-end laptop paid for in cash, specialised broadcasting gear from hobbyist shops, components that could be assembled into a transmission system powerful enough to reach audiences beyond normal channels. In a cheap motel room paid for under a false name, he connected the final wires and activated the system. The setup was crude but effective, capable of piggybacking on existing broadcast networks and digital platforms, inserting his message into the stream of constant information that flowed through modern society. Daniel positioned himself before the camera and began recording. My name is Daniel Cross. Until recently I was Subject 17 of a classified government program known as the Montauk Project. What I'm about to tell you sounds like fiction. I wish it were. But Montauk wasn't some urban legend. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. It is real. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, at the decommissioned Camp Hero Air Force Base in Montauk, New York, the government conducted experiments in mind control, teleportation, and dimensional manipulation. They used children with psychic abilities. I was one of those children. They discovered that the human mind, properly augmented and focused through what they called the Montauk chair, could do more than just bend spoons or read thoughts. It could tear holes in the fabric of reality itself. Through these experiments, contact was made with entities from beyond our dimension. The scientists thought they were communicating with advanced beings who would share knowledge and technology. They didn't understand what they were really dealing with. These entities, I don't know what to call them except perhaps predators, they wanted access to our world, not to share, not to help, but to colonize, to consume. They found willing collaborators among power-hungry men who didn't understand what they were inviting in. In 1983 there was an incident. Something came through, partially. We called it the Beast. 16 people died, officially. The project was supposedly shut down, but it never truly ended. They just went deeper underground, fragmented the research across multiple black sites. Last week they tried again. They brought me back, their most successful gate opener, to create a permanent doorway between dimensions. But I collapsed the gateway instead, destroying the Montauk chair and sealing the breach. Daniel paused, wiping blood that had begun to trickle from his nose. I don't know how long I have before they find me. The entities can't come through directly anymore, but their influence remains. They've compromised people in positions of power, not through some sci-fi body snatching, but through whispered promises, glimpses of knowledge no human was meant to possess. The technology created at Montauk still exists in fragmented form. The research continues under different code names, different facilities. Watch for signs, unusual military installations, clusters of missing children with unusual abilities, weather anomalies that defy explanation. These are the fingerprints of operations continuing what Montauk began. I'm uploading documentation with this broadcast, images, partial research notes, coordinates of suspected continuation sites. I've hidden additional evidence in secure locations that will be released automatically if anything happens to me. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, fundamentally wrong in a way you can't explain, pay attention to that feeling. The membrane between worlds has been weakened. Sometimes things slip through, even without a gate as large as the one they tried to create. They made us forget, but memory is a dangerous thing. Daniel leaned closer to the camera, his eyes haunted but determined, especially when it remembers the future. The recording ended there. Daniel uploaded it along with scanned copies of the documents he'd recovered. He used specialized distribution protocols to seed the files across countless servers worldwide. Too dispersed to be completely erased, too widespread to be dismissed as the ravings of a single disturbed individual. As the final upload completed, his laptop screen flickered with static. From within the electronic noise, patterns emerged. The same signal that had called to him from his television weeks ago. But this time Daniel recognised it for what it was, a beacon, not from them, but from others like him. Children of Montauk, awakening to their suppressed memories, reaching out across the digital void. He wasn't alone. Daniel closed the laptop and packed his few remaining possessions. Through the thin motel curtains, he could see 2 black SUVs pulling into the parking lot. Men in dark suits emerged, moving with the coordinated precision of government operatives. They were too late. The truth was out now, propagating through networks they couldn't fully control. His testimony would reach millions before they could contain it, seeds of awareness planted in receptive minds. Daniel sat calmly on the edge of the bed, waiting for the inevitable knock on the door. He wasn't afraid anymore. He understood now that what had happened at Montauk had changed him permanently. The powers they had awakened in him hadn't disappeared. They had merely gone dormant, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. As the heavy footsteps approached his door, Daniel closed his eyes and reached out with his mind, searching for the quantum threads that connected all points in space-time. There were other places he could go, other times. After all, he had been their best gate opener. The door burst open. 2 agents rushed in, weapons drawn. They found an empty room, the window still closed and locked from the inside, the bathroom vacant. On the bed lay Daniel's phone, screen displaying a text message addressed to Dr. Bennett. There are other doors, other keys, and now I have them all. 3 days later, on computer screens across the world, a single symbol appeared momentarily before vanishing, a triangle intersecting with a perfect circle. The Montauk project was never officially acknowledged. Those who spoke too publicly about it suffered accidents or disappeared. The broadcast was discredited, its evidence dismissed as elaborate hoaxes. But something had changed. People began to notice things they'd overlooked before. Children reported strange dreams of underground facilities and tests. Researchers documented unexplained temporal anomalies near certain government installations, and occasionally, in the white noise between radio stations or in the static of untuned televisions, listeners reported hearing a voice, just on the edge of comprehension, repeating the same warning. They made us forget, but memory is a dangerous thing, especially when it remembers the future. Our story is called False Skies, a conspiracy thriller about a government's darkest deception and the whistleblower who exposed it. It imagines a world where the worst terror attack in modern history was not only foreseen, but deliberately orchestrated to spark endless war, and funnel billions into a sprawling military-industrial complex. Now, 2 decades later, an unassuming former FBI data analyst named Thomas Keane leaks hidden documents that point to a monstrous betrayal and becomes the most wanted man in the nation. Pursued by a shadowy agency determined to keep the official version sealed, Keane races to share the truth with a public reeling from revelations that might reshape the entire post-attack world order. If you find your eyes growing heavy at any point, that's okay. This story is meant to be richly detailed. Perhaps you'll drift to sleep while pondering how fear can become a profitable enterprise, or maybe you'll stay riveted till the final word, uncovering each layer with breathless suspense. Either way, I hope you come away with new insights into how power, once obtained, can cling fiercely to the shadows. Shall we begin? Then settle in, let your breathing slow, and imagine the flicker of old computer screens, top-secret binders, and a few missing pages that change the course of entire nations. This is False Skies, told in 5 parts, each revealing a deeper rung of the labyrinth. Listen closely. The greatest secrets often hide in the quiet corners of official stories. Thomas Keane didn't feel like a revolutionary when he first pressed send. He was simply a man weighed down by guilt, holding a flash drive stuffed with revelations that haunted him for years. The file name he'd chosen of Black Dust gave no hint to the explosive contents. A trove of classified FBI memos, shipping manifests and encrypted communications that, if authenticated, would confirm every darkest rumour about the worst terrorist attack in modern memory. The day of the leak dawned cloudy, ironically anticlimactic for a moment that might reshape history. Keane sat in a dingy motel room near a dusty highway, a battered laptop perched on a wobbly table. The place smelled of stale coffee and regret, but it had functioning Wi-Fi. He checked his secure connection one last time, heart thrumming. With trembling fingers, he uploaded Black Dust to an overseas whistleblower website known for releasing hidden archives. He paused, typed a short note, for the thousands who died and the millions misled. Then he pressed send. Within the hour, that file reached multiple journalists and a global news outlet with a reputation for defying government censors. The outlet's editorial board pored over it, verifying bits of data in a hush of excitement and alarm. By the end of the day, the first breaking story appeared online, overshadowed by disclaimers. Unverified documents claim to reveal inside plot behind 20-year-old attack. Skeptics rolled their eyes. Conspiracy theorists hailed it as the smoking gun they'd always wanted. Most mainstream media initially dismissed it, an editing glitch, a potential hoax, or AI-generated forgery, the official line insisted. Yet some found the content too consistent to be random fakes. A set of typed memos from high-level intelligence briefings dated months before the attack, discussing the necessity of a catalytic event to unify public support for indefinite overseas campaigns. Detailed logs showed insurance policy expansions on certain tower floors days prior. Even stand-down orders for certain war games suspiciously matched the real timeline. Keane watched from his motel room's flickering TV as a breathless anchor tried to explain the leak, disclaiming that the White House calls it foreign propaganda. He sighed. The official denial had begun. Next would come the manhunt for the leaker. He closed his laptop, stuffed it in a bag and left the motel. Time to vanish. He'd served in the FBI's data analytics wing for nearly a decade, compiling anomaly reports around that fateful day. Step by step, he realized too many coincidences tied private defense contractors, intelligence heads, and financial bigwigs, all who profited from the subsequent wars. He quietly copied reams of old files, awaiting the day he had the courage to blow the whistle. That day had come. Elsewhere, powerful wars mobilized. The intelligence community's upper echelons recognized the name Thomas Keane from previous security audits. They suspected him. Within hours, calls went out from a hush-hush division to find him, brand him as a threat to national security. The director of an ultra-secret agency, Eldridge Shaw, personally oversaw the containment plan. He believed the official story must remain unchallenged, or the entire post-attack order might unravel. By midnight, bulletins labelled Keane suspected hacker and domestic threat. Agents started combing digital footprints, scouring camera feeds from near the FBI building. Shaw himself made a call to a contact at the large media conglomerates, instructing them to bury coverage of the story until further notice. The compliance was near instant. Mainstream news gave minimal airtime to the leak, overshadowing it with other headlines. But the genie was out of the bottle. On social media, the hashtag #BlackDust soared, with amateurs dissecting every memo line. A few data experts cross-referenced the IP addresses in the communications, linking them to known government subdomains. Even the partial revelation stunned the public. If the documents were genuine, it implied that some element within the US establishment not only predicted but abetted the terror event, ensuring maximum casualties for maximum political effect. The phrase false skies emerged, referencing how the public's reality had been manufactured like a painted ceiling above them, concealing the real orchestrators. Within a day, small protests flared outside federal buildings in major cities. People demanded clarity. The government's official statement repeated the forgery or foreign propaganda claim. That evening, hackers with anarchy streaks threatened to leak more verifying files if the mainstream media didn't pick it up. Tensions soared. Meanwhile, the stock market wobbled as rumours of insider deals from decades prior re-emerged. Some corporations connected to military contracting faced plunging shares. Keane watched from a safe house now, a friend's abandoned cabin in the woods. He had only the radio for news, and the swirl of distrust and fury filtered through the static. He dreaded how quickly the establishment might label him a traitor. Indeed, the next morning the FBI publicly named him as a prime suspect in a mass leak of classified data, painting him as an extremist. His old colleagues, uncertain, gave no comment. But behind the scenes, many believed the documents might be real. After all, they recognised Keane's skill in combing data for anomalies. Among the swirl stood a figure named Sarah Voss, an investigative journalist blacklisted from major networks for challenging official 9/11 narratives in the past. She recognised the pattern in these newly leaked documents. They matched puzzle pieces she'd glimpsed in hushed conversation with insiders. She reached out to the new site that hosted the files, leaving an encrypted message. "I can help verify. Let me speak to the source." That message eventually found its way to Keane via an online confidant, setting the stage for an alliance that might shake the entire narrative. Thus, from a dusty hideout, Keane typed a coded reply. The story's real race began. Could he deliver evidence to a credible journalist and blow the entire false narrative wide open before the apparatus of Homeland Security, the very system built on the official source, crushed him? The next step would be forging that alliance with Voss and hoping her instincts for truth outweighed her fear of retribution. For if the government's darkest deception was about to be exposed, those who profited from war would not hesitate to silence him, or anyone else, to keep the official illusions intact. 2 days after the leak, the national conversation roiled in confusion. Official channels insisted the Black Dust documents were an elaborate hoax. Yet smaller media sites posted side-by-side comparisons with legitimate CIA or FBI formatting, showing consistent digital footprints. The public found itself caught between an official narrative and a swirling impetus to question everything. Some believed wholeheartedly in the new revelations, others recoiled or felt threatened by the idea that the last 2 decades of conflict might have been orchestrated. Thomas Keane was already on every national watch list. He'd been a mid-level FBI data analyst until 2 years prior, known for thoroughness but also for quietly raising flags about inconsistent intelligence reports pre-9/11. The day he left the bureau, no one suspected he'd spent months copying old files slated for permanent seal. Now his old supervisors told the press that he was mentally unstable, harbouring extremist theories. They withheld mention that those same theories had nearly led to internal inquiries years ago, until higher-ups quashed them. In a suburban neighbourhood outside the capital, a black SUV pulled up to a modest house. 4 men in plain suits stepped out. They were from a specialised domestic counter-intel unit, effectively an arm of the Black Archive, a covert group rumoured to be tied to intelligence and corporate interests. They forced the occupant, a middle-aged data engineer who once worked with Keane, to open his home computer. They rifled through his messages, seizing any mention of Thomas or black dust or files. This was repeated across multiple homes of ex-FBI colleagues, all without official warrants. The Watchers answered to a higher chain, operating in the shadows. Director Eldridge Shaw, head of a new consolidated intelligence agency formed after 9/11, presided over these manhunts from a sleek government tower. He remembered the day of the attacks vividly, the chaos that allowed the Patriot Act and massive expansions of surveillance. He'd advanced quickly by endorsing these expansions and forging alliances with top defence contractors. Now, seeing the leaked docs threaten that entire architecture, Shaw was determined to snuff out the source. Reeve, or Keane, whatever his name is, must be found, he told subordinates. We cannot let fantasies unravel 2 decades of progress. As the manhunt escalated, Keane lurked in the outskirts. He recognised the checkposts on highways, the routine scanning of licence plates. He switched vehicles, used an old identity pass, and avoided all major city centres. He survived on snack bars and occasional small store purchases with cash only. At night, he found a cheap motel, paying in a borrowed name. Every moment felt like it might bring a black SUV squealing into the lot. The tension weighed on him, gnawing at his nerves. Sarah Voss, the investigative reporter, finally established contact with him through a secure chat app. "We need to meet," she wrote. "I can help verify these files properly. People trust me to an extent in the alternative media sphere. We must do it soon. The window is closing." Keane hesitated, knowing any in-person meeting risked being traced. But if they never took that risk, the documents might remain in a swirl of unverified rumour, easy for the mainstream to dismiss. They arranged a rendezvous in a small coastal town's library after hours. The next day, as Keane approached the library, he spotted an unmarked sedan idling in the parking lot. Fear pricked him. Watchers might be tailing. To confirm, he looped around the block. The sedan didn't move, possibly just a random visitor. Summoning courage, he stepped inside. Voss, a tall woman with a worn leather jacket, recognised him from the scattered photos circulated in the media. They sat in a corner among dusty shelves. She offered a handshake, voice calm but urgent. "Thomas, I believe you. The official story has always had holes. Let's finalise the proof so we can break it wide open." Keane exhaled relief, sliding a small USB drive across the table. "This is a more complete set than what was posted. Contains direct memos about the stand-down orders, the deals with defence contractors, the flight path manipulations. Also internal emails referencing the hijackers as assets gone rogue." He paused, tears flickering in his eyes. They used the tragedy for indefinite war, Sarah. They let it happen, or worse, engineered it. Sarah's breath caught. She skimmed a few files on her laptop, eyes widening at references to bank accounts, coded references to Operation Silence. She nodded. "This is explosive, but we need a big platform, enough to force coverage. If we just post it on my blog, they'll discredit or block it. We'll get shut down." She explained a plan. Find a mainstream journalist with a rebellious streak, or do a well-publicised live event that too many watchers can't black out entirely. Suddenly, a muffled scuffle at the library entrance startled them. A figure in dark clothes peered in, Keane tensed. Sarah pressed the laptop closed. They ducked behind shelves as footsteps approached, but the library's old caretaker bumbled out, greeting them obliviously. The suspicious figure, glimpsed through the glass, retreated. Possibly a false alarm, possibly a watcher verifying the location. They parted ways quickly, agreeing to meet again in 48 hours near a major city, planning an infiltration of a local news station that might still allow an unfiltered broadcast. Danger soared. If watchers caught wind of their plan, they'd likely come down with lethal force. That evening, Keane received a frantic text from a friend who had once helped him interpret old FA logs. "One of our guys is dead. A boat accident. They're picking us off." The message cut short. Keane shuddered. The watchers had begun eliminating secondary sources who could confirm the leak's authenticity. He realised the ephemeral window for truth was closing. On the streets, protests flared up as rumours swirled of official foreknowledge. Some saw it as disrespectful to the memory of the victims. Others believed the truth must come out no matter how painful. The government, for its part, ramped up a rhetorical war on misinformation. Director Shaw delivered a short, ominous address, vowing that domestic agitators spreading baseless conspiracies will be brought to justice. Among the swirling chaos, Sarah discovered partial references in the documents to a deeper archive. The Saturn Files, an intelligence ledger tracking post-attack financial flows from official budgets to clandestine owners. If they found that ledger's location, they could show the money trail behind the war expansions. That might be the final nail in the coffin of the official story. They needed it, but time was short. Thus the manhunt overshadowed all. Helicopters roamed certain highways, random car searches increased, and the populace grew uneasy, sensing the government's fear that the leak might be real. Keane ducked from motel to motel, adopting new disguises. Soon, though, his luck would run out, or he'd have to risk a direct showdown, trusting the thunder of public outrage to keep him alive. Little did he realise, the watchers were about to tighten the net, deploying a Black Ops team to ensure the leak never reached unstoppable momentum. If Keane couldn't outmaneuver them long enough to break the final evidence, the official illusions would remain intact. If he did, though, the entire structure of post-attack governance might collapse. The next moves would determine everything. The following week saw Thomas Keane evading watchers by day and collaborating with Sarah Voss by night, each meeting more urgent than the last. They discovered references to the Saturn Files scattered in older CIA memos. Allegedly, it was an encrypted database that meticulously traced the money funneling to defence contractors, oil conglomerates and political campaigns in the immediate weeks after the catastrophic event. If authentic, it would confirm the real motive behind the orchestrated false flag: indefinite war and profiteering. At a safe house borrowed from an old contact of Sarah's, they pored over these hints by lamplight. Among the digital shards was a location clue: a retired NSA facility on the outskirts of a southwestern desert, defunct but rumoured to store old backups. "We find that offline archive," Sarah said. "We can copy the Saturn Files in raw form. That's the smoking gun." Keane nodded, though dread of infiltration weighed on him. Between them, they had minimal resources: a battered car, a few $1,000s in cash, and a handful of laptops. The Watchers, on the other hand, had near limitless means: drones, infiltration teams, access to every camera feed in the nation. But the Watchers didn't fully expect them to attempt to break in at a presumably abandoned facility, so maybe the element of surprise worked in their favour. Director Eldridge Shaw ramped up the clampdown. The official narrative shaped the public mind. A rogue ex-FBI analyst has unleashed foreign-forged documents aimed at undermining national security. Many believed it, but a growing minority saw government overreach, especially after multiple suspicious accidents claimed the lives of other potential whistleblowers. People asked, if it's so false, why chase and kill so aggressively? In one instance, a known data archivist was found shot in his home, with the press labelling it a botched robbery, ignoring the data archivist's link to the leaked material. On social media, black dust soared. Some city squares erupted in protest, carrying signs that read "We deserve the truth" or "Stop killing our whistleblowers." The Watchers responded by intensifying arrests, calling them rioters. Keane tried to remain focused. He realised that if the Saturn Files were real, it might show direct bank transfers from major corporate boards into the pockets of certain officials, all tied to legislation passing huge war budgets after the false flag. That would upend the entire post-attack establishment. No wonder they're stopping at nothing, Sarah murmured. Securing fake IDs, they travelled cross-country by back roads. Each motel they used for a single night, paying cash. They dodged major highways, suspecting license plate readers. The Watchers likely guessed their aim was to expose more data, but might not know the exact target. Meanwhile, the tension between them soared. The climate was near police state. Newscasts repeated that the domestic terrorist, Thomas Keane, must be turned in. Civilians were promised big rewards for tips. Billboards with Keane's face popped up along highways. He wore a baseball cap and used tinted glasses. But each day was a dice roll. A near encounter. On a lonely stretch, a black SUV sped behind them. They recognised the pattern. Sarah swerved onto a side route, forging through a small farmland path. The Watchers gave chase. Shots rang out, blowing a tyre. The car careened into a ditch. They scrambled out, hid among tall corn. The Watchers searched, but eventually gave up, presumably to avoid a big scene. This brush with violent capture left them rattled, but also more resolved. "We're obviously on the right track if they're that desperate," Sarah said, breath shaky. Finally, after days, they reached the deserted perimeter of the old NSA outpost. It was ringed by a crumbling fence, a few rusted signposts. By the look of the cracked asphalt and weed-choked yard, it had been abandoned for over a decade. Perfect place to bury secrets. Under twilight, they found a corner of the fence cut open by looters. They slipped inside quietly. The main building rose in silhouette, windows boarded up. A stray coyote howled in the distance, wind carrying a faint metallic whistling from open vents. Inside, dust-coated floors. Old cubicles sat in disarray. They used flashlights to navigate. Eventually they located a sub-basement with battered computer racks. A few beeped faintly with emergency power. "There's power? That's suspicious," Keane muttered. Indeed, it suggested the Watchers might still be pulling some data from here. They approached a locked door labelled Server Vault Archive 6. With Sarah's phone, they scanned a partial code from the documents, generating a bypass sequence that might override older system locks. After multiple tries, a green light flickered. The vault door clunked open. Inside the vault, rows of drives and reels lined metal shelves. Dusty but humming with minimal climate control. They sifted through labels: Operation Cast Peak, Post-K-War Roster, Saturn. That was it. A battered cluster of servers with the word Saturn FSV. They carefully powered one terminal, hooking it to a laptop. Sarah typed a root command. The screen glowed. Restricted. Saturn 1, 2, 3. Enter pass. They tried typical keywords from the docs. On the third attempt, a beep. Access. They were in, files scrolled, each referencing massive funding authorizations, building demolitions, insider trading, logs dated within days of the big attack. The scope was monstrous. It implicated high-level bureaucrats, big banks, and even a few journalists. They orchestrated the tragedy to galvanize fear, pass endless war budgets, feed the arms economy, Sarah whispered, stunned. All hidden under national security drapery. Some lines suggested hijackers were known assets used as a controlled ignition. The betrayal was staggering. In that hush, footsteps upstairs. The Watchers had arrived, no doubt detecting the power usage. "We must copy this now," Keane said, launching a data transfer to multiple external drives. Meanwhile, Sarah prepared to kill lights and hide, but the Watchers rushed down, flashlights slicing through gloom. Gunfire echoed. Bullets pinged off server racks. Sarah huddled behind a console, returning fire with a small pistol she carried. Keane initiated an upload, hooking the server to a secure satellite link via a portable router. The Watchers advanced. He typed frantically, the progress bar inching along, transmission at 10%. Then Director Shaw himself stepped in. "Stop!" he roared, voice reverberating in the metal corridor. "Keane, you have no idea what you're unleashing. The stability of entire alliances depends on burying that day's complexities." Shots resumed. Sarah took a graze to her shoulder, but kept the Watchers pinned. The bar reached 50%. Shaw barked an order to lob a small explosive. They tossed a flashbang. The ear-shattering pop disoriented them. The watchers closed in, tackling Sarah. Another pinned Keen. The laptop screen cracked under a boot. The upload froze at 80%. In the struggle, Keen twisted free, smashing a guard's face with the laptop, which ironically forced the laptop back to life. The watchers tried to pull cables. Meanwhile, a stray bullet hit a server coolant line. Steam hissed. The infiltration team realised this was too risky. The entire place might go up. Shaw advanced on Keen, gun raised. "You can die here with your illusions, or you can vanish quietly. The truth will never see daylight." Suddenly an explosion from the coolant line triggered a chain reaction in the old power system. Fire licked the corners, sending watchers scrambling. Sarah crawled to safety. Keen, battered, saw the upload bar at 98%. He roared in defiance, pressing a final keystroke to confirm. The system beeped success. The watchers realised the data had been sent out, unstoppable now. Furious, one aimed at Keen's chest. A final shot rang out. Darkness overcame him. The watchers yanked the cable, but it was too late. The Saturn files had presumably reached a safe node on the open web. Alarms beeped. The facility's meltdown forced a hurried retreat. In the swirling smoke, Sarah was dragged away by an explosion's concussive wave. The watchers grabbed Shaw, retreating. The entire sub-basement collapsed in flame and dust. For all they knew, Keen perished under the rubble. But the watchers had lost the bigger war. The Saturn files were free. Within hours, a torrent of new evidence, the Saturn files, flooded the internet. Anonymous activists, archivists, and journalists worldwide mirrored the data. Even as official agencies tried to block or discredit it, the story soared across social media, overshadowing government censorship efforts. Original documents codenamed Operation White Door, some Project Switchboard, commissioned for Filter some Rossi, provided stark details. Insider collusion with extremist groups, advanced planning to ensure that attacks triggered panic and indefinite war mobilization, international reaction. Allies demanded urgent clarifications from Washington. Rival nations called for an emergency UN session. The general public, seeing internal memos where top officials weighed acceptable civilian losses for strategic advantage, reeled in fury. Large-scale protests ignited in multiple capitals. People demanded resignations. The entire intelligence apparatus faced the biggest crisis of legitimacy since the day it was formed. Meanwhile, the White House insisted the documents were tampered forgeries, but the mass of cross-corroboration was overwhelming. Anonymous data scientists validated digital signatures, timestamps, usage logs consistent with 20-year-old records. Even some mid-level intelligence employees, shaken by the revelations, publicly confirmed the authenticity. Back home, in the US, the meltdown was immediate. Rallies erupted outside major government buildings, calling for arrests of those named in the files. Corporate board members from arms manufacturing companies faced lawsuits. The stock market dived, particularly for defense sector stocks. Over time, entire boards resigned, some fleeing the country. Various retired generals disclaiming involvement or giving partial confessions fueled headlines. The public found itself torn between anger, betrayal, and heartbreak, reliving the trauma of that fateful day under a horrifying new lens. Media torn. Some mainstream outlets quickly pivoted, acknowledging the new data as genuine after initial attempts to bury it. High-profile anchors apologised for previously parroting the official story. Others doubled down on patriotic narratives, ironically fueling further distrust. The swirl of disinformation versus actual data soared, but the raw evidence was too extensive to suppress. "You can't close the barn door after the horses fled," the commentator said. "The entire architecture of post-attack policy is under question." Director Eldridge Shaw attempted a grand press conference to reassert authority, but the crowd drowned him in jeers. Calls for congressional hearings soared. In a last-chance effort, Shaw's office declared a national security emergency, urging martial law to keep order. That, ironically, only inflamed dissent. Certain states refused to cooperate. Over the next weeks, the old alignment of power began fracturing. Investigations launched from multiple angles, with newly emboldened lawmakers prosecuting those who orchestrated the post-attack expansions for personal gain. Sarah Voss emerged from the southwestern fiasco battered but alive. She revealed how Watchers had infiltrated that abandoned NSA site, how Keane died a hero finalising the upload. She published a moving column titled "One Man's Last Key Press," describing how, in a swirl of gunfire, Keane completed the Saturn files transmission, ensuring no one could bury it. The piece went viral, shaping the public's view of Keane as a tragic whistleblower who gave everything for the truth. At the local level, families of 9/11 victims demanded new trials. The old official commissions were discredited. People realised entire reams of contradictory evidence had been sealed. Even the original investigators admitted they'd been misled or threatened. The emotional toll soared once more. Many felt as though they'd been lied to for decades about the biggest national tragedy. A wave of introspection overcame the country. How had fear become so profitable, and how did good people allow it? Internationally, alliances that had supported the war on terror felt betrayed. Some withdrew forces from contested regions. Others launched their own parliamentary investigations, suspecting shared complicity. The world order that was shaped after the attack started crumbling, replaced by an uncertain future. Some dared to hope it meant a less militarised approach. Others worried that new extremist groups might exploit the chaos. In the midst of all this, rumours circulated that Thomas Keane might still be alive, sightings in some far-off place. Yet no concrete proof existed. Official statements considered him presumed deceased. If he survived, he might have chosen the anonymity of an unknown identity, having done what he set out to do. 6 months later, a massive Senate hearing convened. Top officials were subpoenaed. The public watched enthralled as ex-generals, ex-CEOs, and ex-administration figures from 20 years prior faced grilling. Some invoked national security, others pled the Fifth, while a few confessed partial roles. Indictments followed, though not all ended in convictions. The system was too vast, too intricately rigged. Yet the symbolic effect was undeniable. Never again would the official story be accepted unchallenged. At the same time, Sarah Voss launched an independent media platform broadcasting daily updates on the False Skies Inquiry. People from across the spectrum contributed testimonies, documents, or personal stories of how they'd suspect hush-ups. Freed from blacklists, she soared as a public figure, championing the cause of government accountability. A year after the Saturn Files meltdown, a new memorial was erected near the site of the original 9/11 tragedy. A statue depicting a single figure pressing a key, a reflection of Keane's final act. The inscription read, "They took truth from us in the shadows, he brought it back in the light." Visitors left flowers, some seeking solace that the realm of power had at least partially been unmasked. Epilogue. In a quiet coastal town, a fisherman swore he recognised a man from a circulated photo. Older, hair bleached by salt and sun, eyes weighed with sadness. The man told him he used to work for the government, but no more. He spoke of illusions and the cost of unveiling them. Then he vanished at sunrise, leaving only a single battered flash drive behind. If it was Thomas Keane, he apparently chose a wandering fate, letting the world handle the legacy of his bombshell leak. Public trust in large institutions remained shaken. Some remained furious, others hopeful that a new transparency might arise. In the corners of the internet, conspiracy watchers debate if the watchers still exist, planning new false flags. But for now, the greatest deception in modern times has been laid bare. The name Black Dust stands as a testament to the unstoppable power of truth once it's unleashed. In the hush that follows, the final note, they used fear to shape the world, But one day fear lost. The truth soared free, and the illusions that once cloaked the skies were shattered in a single day.